All right, welcome to America This Week. Uh, I guess live, unusually. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
Uh, First of all, apologies to everybody for the disorganization. Normally, this is a recorded show that's out by now. We're gonna go live though. We're gonna do it like Bill O'Reilly said. Fuck it, we'll do it live. Because I'm on the road, and this was the only window when we could do it. But
Right.
boy, do we have an interesting show today because the world is just insane. Um, uh, I was out, Walter, yesterday for a period of hours where in a place where I was not allowed to use a telephone for a while, and got back and saw that there was a statement by Putin that has been variously interpreted, but essentially opening the door for a ceasefire.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen this or yet or not. Have you not?
This morning, I thought that door had been opened a couple of days ago, but I'm
It
not
was it was
sure.
yesterday. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was yesterday in the afternoon. So yeah, we might as well just watch it. It's it's fascinating. The reactions to this are fascinating. But let's hear what he has to say first.
Okay.
We agree with the propositions to stop hostilities, but we proceed from the fact that such ceasefire should be such that would lead to a permanent peace and remove the initial, original causes of the crisis. We agree.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that little piece doesn't tell you a whole lot, but what it leaves out is that it starts off by talking. He actually started off by saying, "I want to thank President Trump for paying so much attention to this situation." Then he says, "We agree with the idea," and in the term he uses is "прекратить боевые действия," which is like we agree with the idea of ceasing hostilities. But then he goes on to say something pretty similar to what Anna Baerbock said last week, which is that it can't be a temporary thing; it's got to be a lasting thing, and we have to get rid of the initial reason for the conflict. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, because the Western commentators have all interpreted that as we have to eliminate the state of Ukraine, or eliminate Ukraine as a nation, because that is the начальная причина. That's the original reason. I think it's something else, but that's how it's been interpreted. But
Why has it been interpreted that way? To the favor of the Europeans who want to maximize the threat, and or because there's reason to believe that's true?
I don't think there's any reason to believe that that's true, that they want to eliminate Ukraine as a nation. I think the worst possible legitimate reason that you could ascribe is that they want to reclaim all of the disputed territory, and that they want to get rid of NATO as a threat. Now, that's when we start to getting into some weirdness, because of the way the various countries responded to what he said. No. First of all, Walter, like what I thought that was a major historic moment. Just the idea of Putin going on television saying that he's open to the concept
Right.
seemed like a big deal to me. I don't know. I mean, was I naive about that, or I don't know.
Well, you're only naive about it if you take the darkest and most cynical interpretation of Putin as a, figure and a speaker. If you're a normal person, I would submit, and that he's bad, and that he's aggressive, and that he's a Russian, somewhat imperial figure, if not a dictator, then you think, wow, we're finally talking.
Right, exactly.
And we're talking directly, not through some strange, hydraulic set of pipes that run underground, but face to face. And he put his face forward and said, to the American people that we're ready. We're ready to be ready, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And something unprecedented happened. People who have not passed a word officially, and remember, we have officials going there now, right? I believe, have finally started jaw-jawing instead of war-warring. Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, apparently a lot of things are wrong with it. So,
for those who want to go war-warring on and on forever, of course it's wrong. But for the little Walter Kern, who grew up in the 1970s and heard the bells of peace ring on the churches of Little Marine on St. Croix, Minnesota in 1975, and felt a lot better after having watched war on TV since he was born in Vietnam, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, I got out of my little event yesterday and I saw that and I'm like, all right, well, that's a start. I mean, like, what could be bad about that? Like, in the darkest.
Ask John Bolton.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So now there was a contravening statement, and I apologize to everyone for not knowing the chronology of this, when exactly this was made. But Zelensky also had a statement this week, and let's listen to what he said.
Сьогоднішній день візит делегації парламенту Нідерландів. Я подякував за підтримку. Обговорили подальшу спільну роботу в Євросоюзі. Візит делегації Туреччини, урядовців та бізнесу цієї країни. Наші друзі, наші важливі партнери. Багато що дійсно об'єднує наші держави, і ми вдячні Туреччині за підтримку суверенітету України, нашої територіальної цілісності. Вдячні також за підтримку наших зусиль заради миру. Сьогодні говорили про подальшу спільну роботу.
Anyway, he went on to say basically, I'm sorry, I should have gotten that full clip. He went on
a lot about how much he likes trading with the Dutch.
Right. He went on to say that Russia is stalling, and essentially to insinuate that it wasn't sincere.
Stalling before doing what? Having an actual ceasefire?
Yeah, it's not really clear. Stalling for peace Russia is stalling peace. Was the
dude, how many days ago were you unwilling to do any kind of negotiation and standing up and saying, we'll never trust them, let's just keep at this war thing? That was stalling too, in a sense.
It would seem to me. By the way, yeah, this is a good question by Koala Bear. What was he speaking? What language is that? Orc? No, it wasn't. That was Ukrainian. But it was, what was interesting is that he used a very common word there, Держава, which is, God, I don't even know how it would translate in English. It's sort of like Держава is like our mighty nation, or like our superpower, sort of. It's kind of a stretch to call Ukraine a Держава. Like, United States is a Держава, right? Russia is a Держава. I'm not sure about Ukraine.
Ukraine, anyway, which stretches from Russia to Romania. From Russia to Hungary, from Russia to Belarus, almost completely enclosed.
Right, the vast expanses, and I don't mean to pick on Ukraine. I have nothing against Ukrainians at all. It's just that was a very strange use of language. I guess it's what you would do. Look, if you're at war, that's probably the language you would use. I probably should check myself there a little bit, but
no, so I mean, we can make fun of Putin's rhetoric at the point it becomes excessive. The ancient Christian empire of the czars and the da da da. You know?
Yeah, Putin, when he goes overboard, tends to talk like a gangster. Like that tends to be his thing, is that he slips out of character, or he slips into character, and starts saying things like, you know, we'll pull their legs off or whatever it is. But okay, so he said that. Then we got another quote from Victoria Nuland, our old friend.
Okay. Looking better every day.
Really very, very important that in this period that Europe not only be able to step up, but step up fast, because as the artillery shells run out, as the air defense interceptors run out, as the ability to produce drones at scale, which have made the difference for Ukraine on the battlefield, gets harder. Europe has the capacity, not only with these proposals, but conceivably collateralizing against frozen assets that they are holding of Putin's, at least for a short time, to do more and to do it fast. The thing that's concerning me most today is the cutoff of intelligence streams from the United States, and pressure on allies like the UK not to use US intelligence for their own weapons. The primary purpose of US intelligence has been to help the Ukrainians see Russian attacks coming and have advanced warning. There are also key weapon systems that do not cue and do not hit their targets without support from US satellite cueing and the military GPS system. So people are going to die. Ukrainians are going to die, more of them, if this pause lasts significantly longer. And it is dangerous, and it's not a capability that Europe can replace with any kind of speed.
Okay.
All
right. What?
Yeah. So that's important. We can cut her off there because a string of Europeans is about to disagree with her, and should we?
Let's sum up what I think she said. It's really important to Europe to step up. And at the end, she said they don't have the ability.
Right.
Basically. It's also very important that we share intelligence with the Ukrainians, because they're going to die during this pause. Wait, isn't it called a ceasefire? Isn't the idea of that people stop dying, or is she referring to something else?
No, during the pause of aid. So right now, the United States is cutting.
But should a ceasefire take place during the pause of aid, that would also stop people dying.
It would, yeah. I don't think we're at a ceasefire yet, though, are we? I mean, we've signaled a willingness to entertain it,
to consider it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what she's basically saying, she said two things there, really. One is that, which is fascinating. This is Victoria Nuland talking. Remember that this was the former, Sky Marshal of the United States war effort, saying Europe needs to step up. That's the first thing she's saying.
And fast.
And fast. And then she says at the end that they can't. So it's two messages at one time. I think we can all understand the politics there. She wants Europe to mobilize, but also is basically suggesting that the world needs the United States. So she's saying that now.
Speaking under the rubric of the International Institute, or the Institute of Global Politics, whose symbol is the crown.
The crown. I love it. Yeah, I didn't even notice that. That's amazing. Okay, so we had some fun. We didn't have some fun. We discussed the occasionally terrifying bearing of Ursula von der Leyen in our previous show, and this is what she said earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge amount that we are offering now to member states or for joint procurement, 800 billion. So that's enormous. And therefore, I think we will focus now on delivering the legal proposals, which is under time pressure. We are under time pressure to do that. We want to do this before the next European Council. And this is where the focus is on. Of course, if there are interesting ideas, I'm absolutely willing to look into this. But the tasking of the European Council was very clear, that we deliver on the national escape clause and that we deliver on the proposal with the new instrument with 150 billion euros in loans for joint procurement. We are looking into the topic of cohesion funds, as you know, and to deliver on the private sector, the Savings and Investment Union, and a different lending pattern of the EIB.
Okay, all right, we can stop there.
Cut.
The most important thing there is that the number 800 billion. She's talking.
Why not just say $1 trillion?
Yeah, why not? Why not just say $1 trillion, right?
Because it would sound fake, even though 800 billion is probably also fake.
I mean, who knows? We're going to get into some of the how they're going to achieve this a little later, which is wild. But okay, so she promises 800 billion, and that's a significant amount of money. And it, as we talked about, she gave this pretty dramatic speech talking about how we are entering an era of rearmament. But
that's for the rearmament of all of NATO or all of those countries, not for Ukraine.
Not for Ukraine, no, but for all of those countries. So what does that mean exactly? Now, I scanned around the European media to see what they're saying about this. Is this just one official talking like this? No, everybody's saying basically the same thing. There was a fascinating interview on Die Welt, the German outlet, which has a very big English language operation. Kind of worth it, I think, for people who are looking for reliable news out of Europe. Well, reliable is an interesting word. It's extensively covered, right? Let's put it that way. GW does a good job of just getting all the stuff. So
of mixing the various state-sponsored medias and adding a little independent commentary.
Exactly. So we're going to get here. This is an interview with, I guess, I'm going to screw up his name, but he's British, and he's the new, I believe, current or former, deputy supreme commander of Europe, and
in
this
NATO
interview,
or
NATO.
Okay.
NATO. So this, there's two clips. We're just going to listen to one after the other. They're both about 2 minutes long, and they're both pretty significant. So let's just hear the first part, if we could.
Okay. For more, let's bring in Sir Richard Shirra, former Deputy Supreme Aligned Commander for Europe at NATO. He's also the co-founder of the risk management company Strategia Worldwide. Sir, welcome to DW. We heard it there. The EU has agreed on allocations of 800 billion for rearmament in the long run, but Ukraine really seems like it needs help now. Is the EU truthfully doing all it can?
I think yesterday's events were really, really important. Let's be clear about that. And that 800 billion euro fund that was announced is nothing short of good news. But you're absolutely right. Ukraine needs help now. The Americans have made it clear that they're going to cut immediate support, cut intelligence support. And so this is what I call a come as you are party for Europe and Canada. European nations and Canada have just now got to ramp up immediately to fill the gap. And this means taking risk. It means giving immediate money, I think, to the Ukrainians who can spend the money very, very quickly without the procurement challenges that many European countries, but also for European countries to dig deep in their own arsenals to provide Ukraine the means to hold Russia, because the American withdrawal is going to hit them hard.
Mm-hmm. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Europe faces a clear and present danger, but that danger is actually not new, is it? It's been 3 years since Putin launched his attack on Ukraine, and the Europeans are still scrambling for a joint strategy. Is this not too little, too late?
He's going to say we should have done this too long ago.
Well, I've been arguing that this is 11 years too late. The attack on Ukraine was launched in February 2014. This is when the war started. Yes, of course, the full-scale invasion in February 2022 was the next major phase. And you're absolutely right. Europe and Canada and NATO as a whole should have stepped up to the mark 3 years ago at the very latest. But having said all that, it's better,
you know what
better
stopped
late
you?
than never. Is that
Uncle Sam, having old Uncle Sam in your
Exactly.
pocket. That's what stopped you. If it was so urgent, you would have done something. Instead, you called Daddy.
Well, he goes on to say that. That's what's funny.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
message? And this is welcome news.
Better late than never, but I want to look at the
Okay,
reason.
we can stop here for a sec. So just to be clear, and this is what a lot of people, this is like what the Atlantic magazine said. Remember when Obama elected not to go into Crimea? You know, everybody said
back when it was a good thing not to fight Russia directly. Right.
Yeah, exactly that. But he was heavily criticized in the States by the usual suspects, so it's fascinating who puts the beginning of the war where, right? Because now we're going to hear NATO say that it started when Putin entered the Crimea and annexed it and held a referendum that nobody considers real.
Can we just pause for a minute because we've got a British person on screen?
Mm-hmm.
There was a Crimean War in the 19th century between Britain and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
as part of what's called the Great Game, their ongoing.
Oh, that's a great book, by the way. If you read that,
they're ongoing, multi-platform, multimodal intelligence war that never went quite hot, except in certain ways, over at India and Central Asia. So we as Americans are looking at two combatants who actually fought each other. And are resuming and would like to resume. As far as Sir Richard is really concerned, the war started probably back in the 1840s.
Right, yeah, or before that even, right?
Exactly. When they were trying to hold Afghanistan as a buffer zone against Russia getting influence in India, and Russia was taking over, Tashkent and Kazakhstan and trying to appease the Khans and so on. This is really a conflict in this part of the world, especially when you get to Crimea, that these guys have been at forever. And then they found good old United States.
Right, to take over the take over the bill, right? So yeah, and the if you haven't read that book, I'm looking up the author. The Great Game, The Struggle for Empire, Peter Hopkirk. Yeah. So this is like the definitive. First of all, it's a great sort of rollicking historical read. And if you've ever seen the movie The Man Who Would Be King, it's all about these sort of early intelligence wars between the two countries, where the
two empires, the British Empire and the Russian Empire.
Yeah, and the British were continually sending people in disguise into the region, and this was sort of pre-Lawrence of Arabia kind of stuff. We got to keep that up on the screen. I'm sorry, if we can. That same one. But the book is funny because every time, basically,
he even looks like Michael Caine.
He does look like Michael Caine, right? God's holy trousers. But every chapter seems to end with heads on sticks. It's like the British go into the Khyber Pass, and there's heads on sticks at the end of the thing. So it's not a happy history for England, even though the war for influence, like they did have occasional high points. But anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. For him, it probably goes back to the dawn of time. The questioner says, okay, it's too little too late, but now what? And then he gives this like fascinating answer.
Why this didn't happen earlier? Was it naive for European nations to rely on the US for their security and the security of their neighbors for as long as they did?
Yes, in a word. And Europe for 70 years has been sitting back and allowing America to provide European security. And European countries have frankly been freeloading off American support. So in a sense, Europe, we need to look at ourselves in Europe for some of the reasons for America's withdrawal from the scene. And this has been naive. Yes, of course it has. But of course now, and the reason this didn't happen 3 years ago is also because of a sort of ostrich-like head in the sand about the real threat faced by Putin to European security as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So now it does seem clear that Europe is going to have to own this conflict. What chance does Ukraine stand given the dramatic shift in circumstances?
Well, let's be optimistic about this. Europe has more than the capability. The European combined GDP dwarfs that of Russia, and with political will, with political courage, and by making sacrifices, Europe can absolutely help support Ukraine in not only holding Russia, but holding on long enough, I think, to then build up the capabilities to push Russia, if not out of Ukraine, but at least to make Russia realize that they will never achieve their aims in Ukraine. Because let's be clear, Putin has never stepped back from his intent to remove Ukraine from the map as a sovereign state. And that threat has existential consequences for Europe as a whole. And we in Europe have got to be prepared to do what needs to be done to support Ukraine.
Okay.
These US aid cuts will leave you.
So yeah, we can get rid of them. But Walter, so there's a line of other European commentary. There's the new German minister basically making an announcement that they're going to do whatever they can to scramble to get together. I think it was 200 billion to start, but they're going to make as much headway as possible toward that big number. Macron sort of threw the whole idea of a peace settlement off the table, said it was ridiculous. We can listen to that tape. Well, what's so key about what he just said is, did you hear? Oh, do you want to do it? Might as well just listen to this. This is quick, I think. This is Macron.
En Ukraine dure maintenant depuis plus de 3 ans. Nous avons, dès le premier jour, décidé de soutenir l'Ukraine et de sanctionner la Russie. Et nous avons bien fait. Car c'est non seulement le peuple ukrainien qui lutte avec courage pour sa liberté, mais c'est aussi notre sécurité qui est menacée. En effet, si un pays peut envahir impunément son voisin en Europe, alors personne ne peut plus être sûr de rien. Et c'est la loi du plus fort qui s'applique. Et la paix ne peut plus être garantie sur notre continent même. L'histoire nous l'a enseigné. Au-delà de l'Ukraine, la menace russe est là et touche les pays d'Europe, nous touche. La Russie a déjà fait du conflit ukrainien un conflit mondial. Elle a mobilisé sur notre continent des soldats nord-coréens, des équipements iraniens, tout en aidant ces pays à s'armer davantage. La Russie du président Poutine viole nos frontières pour assassiner des opposants, manipule les élections en Roumanie, en Moldavie. Elle organise des attaques numériques contre nos hôpitaux.
He goes on. I mean, you get it. Europe is in a global conflict. You take that statement, you combine it with Sir Richard's statement there that Europe is more than capable of winning this thing and not only holding off Russia, but making a real impact.
Do you remember not that long ago when Russia's beachhead against Europe was not these far eastern parts of Ukraine, but Poland and Czechoslovakia and so on? And they're talking as though that huge advantage that they gained, all those countries going into NATO, is still not enough if you don't have that little slice of Ukraine way to the east. What?
Right.
This is as big it'll take a lot more gas for those tanks to get across. It'll take a lot more to come into Germany from Russia than it will from East Germany or wherever. I mean, we have pushed those babies back almost right into their capital, and they're still the ones who are menacing us.
Right. Yeah, they don't even acknowledge the fact that they wiped out the entire Eastern Bloc without a shot.
Exactly.
In 89, 90, 91, that this was all negotiated. Depending on who you listen to, I mean, look,
They got the Baltics.
They got the Baltics,
but their failure to get this last piece of the puzzle, and not just a failure to get the whole last piece, but to get the entirety of that piece. Their failure to get 4/5 of that piece, or to only get 4/5 rather than 5/5, is the greatest security struggle of our time.
And they're not acknowledging the fact that, look, we brought in all these countries, and one of them was Romania, and now we already have to overturn their elections because Romania is not thrilled about this war effort.
Romania didn't realize that when it invited the beneficence and the protection of NATO, it also lost every right to have its own elections.
Right. Yes. Or
its own candidates.
Its own candidates. Yeah. It has to now ascribe to the policy aims of Ursula and Sir Richard and I guess Victoria Nuland behind the scenes. But Walter, don't you find it kind of amazing? I haven't heard Europeans talk this way ever. I mean, this whole idea of, we can go it alone. We can do this. And to me, if you put all this stuff together, when Putin says that we have to get rid of the initial reason or the starting reason for the conflict, to me, what he's saying is I can't go forward with a peace deal if I've got Europe saying it's going to invest, it's going to create a whole new rearmament campaign to make sure that there is no peace deal.
Will this rearmament campaign of Europe's, when it adds the 800 and some change from 800 to 820 or 840, even in the stories we just saw, it's creeping up. Will this 840 billion exceed the total expenditure up till now, or make up for some withdrawal of funds from the United States? In other words, is Europe doubling its capacity, or increasing it by 40%, or is it just sort of treading water given what they expect from the United States' reduced commitment?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think we'd have to do the math on that. What percentage of NATO's arsenal was the United States and United States funding? Maybe some of our listeners know the answer to that question. I don't. I would suspect that that many times over, the military capability of NATO is, a United States led thing, and that without us footing most of the bill and most of the weapons, that they, in order to quote unquote fill the gap, as they said, it's going to be a massive endeavor for them.
But what I heard in all that, the prediction of a massive endeavor, and a lot of financial terms thrown around, but I didn't really hear what it meant militarily. It was just a kind of, big cloud of money is coming your way, and it's somehow going to be assigned to military projects. But, and we're going to raise it somehow. At one point, she said by borrowing against the frozen Russian funds, maybe. We're going to go into how they might finance this in a minute. But in other words, I didn't really hear an imminent war-winning strategy in any of that.
No, it sounded like the first step was let's just get enough money to Ukraine so that they can hold the ground.
But you don't hold the ground with money. You hold the ground with weapons and troops. So how is that going to translate back into that? Has Europe tooled up to create this huge arms reservoir for them? I mean,
do they have the intelligence capability to go in there and the same thing that Nuland was talking about to make sure that they have advance warning of Russian attack Russian missile attacks, that sort of thing,
and the ability to target Russian targets with their own missiles and so on?
Right. Do they have that? Or are they drawing upon, is their system predicated upon intelligence sharing with the United States? We're going to find that out, but it's fascinating. This is like a paradigm shifting event that we're witnessing. The United States essentially withdrawing from the deal. They're trying to conclude a peace agreement, which I think is the right thing to do. And here's Europe saying, not only are we not going to go along with this, but we're going to do everything possible, publicly, privately, and in all other ways, to make sure that this does not succeed. Right.
To make sure that the peace deal does not succeed.
Yeah, that there is no peace deal that we can.
But is that what they're saying, or that we're going to prepare for it to fall apart, or we're going to prepare for Russia to abrogate it? Are they talking about blocking the peace deal itself, or just building up their defenses should it fail?
I didn't hear anything suggesting a willingness to discuss or to engage with the other side.
So they're going to reject this ceasefire, even though Putin and maybe even Zelensky might sign to it. Europe's going to exercise a veto.
But that's what it sounds like to me. Europe is stepping into the role that the United States was in previously.
Listen, I'm going to need you guys to keep fighting.
Yeah. Remember at the start of the war, a million years ago, before people forgot, it was Zelensky who was saying that he was open to negotiation before somebody knocked on his office door and said, yeah, we're not going with that. So you're going to have to stop making those statements in public. And pretty soon he was no longer talking about negotiating. He was only talking about victory and winning the war and all these other things, which again, I would too. I guess if I were a leader of that country, if I had access to unlimited amounts of weapons and material and soldiers.
You're talking about Ukraine.
Yeah. If I didn't, though,
unlimited amounts of soldiers have become limited.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. Exactly. And this war has been an incredibly destructive, bloody thing already, destabilizing. Everybody should want it to be over, except apparently the leaders of Europe. So the language they use is, well, we can't reward Putin for invading the country. Okay, that's fine. So, but you either have to beat him militarily.
These are language games.
Yeah, I mean, what are we talking about here?
If I say uncle, and I'm bleeding out on the mat at the MMA fight, and in and out of consciousness, am I rewarding the other guy? War is called. Somebody said earlier, I think it was what's her name with the hair, that we can't, or maybe it was Macron, we can't allow the survival of the fittest to become a principle in affairs.
Yeah, that was Macron. Yeah.
Well, that's what war is, dude. That's what separates it from civilian life. So if you don't want survival of the fittest and the rule of the strong and so on to be the determinative factor, then you must get back to a peaceful form of competition and coexistence.
Yeah, you have to sue for peace if you can't be
You can't make war
victorious.
unwarlike, okay?
And to some extent, this is kind of some of the same mentality we see in the Gaza situation. Although in this realm, it's even weirder. They keep talking about how we have to fight this to victory, but there's really, I just don't see how they're actually going to do that. I guess they, and you and I are going to get into this, Walter. I mean, this is Europe sort of reawakening to a dream that it can go back to World War II, and this time it's like a sequel. This time we'll do it without America, right? I mean, isn't that the fantasy here? It seems like.
Well, because we are so historically illiterate in this country, and because I live in this country, and therefore am also relatively illiterate, I don't understand the meaning of the Ukraine beachhead for the British and for NATO in terms of the whole history. Because you can keep moving. You can move back from 2014, and you can move back to 1945, and then you can move back before that, and you can move back to the Russian Revolution. You can move back, as I say, to the Great Game and the Crimean War. But there was a time when the British Empire and the Russian Empire were in ongoing contest throughout Asia, and parts of this conflict resemble parts of that conflict. What they were going for, though, wasn't justice in those days. See, wars didn't use to clothe themselves in the language of justice and fairness and principle. They used to be about getting stuff and protecting other stuff that you'd already gotten.
The humanitarian war thing, which they really unveiled that. That was the NATO thing, really, with Serbia.
Right.
Yeah.
War didn't become a moral, a moral issue until rather late in the game, and making it a moral issue probably hasn't been good for war, because since that can never really be settled, you can never make the wrong people ultimately pay for their sins, and you can never display your own rightness, brilliantly enough. You get trench warfare.
Right.
But in any case, I don't really know what they're saying, but I do detect nostalgia in it, in the sense that here we are back on the battlefield that we've been on when Napoleon fought in Ukraine, what's called Ukraine, right? I mean, did he not? Did he get that far in his invasion of Russia? Here they are trying again. What's so funny about this is that they interpret being at his doorstep as him being at their doorstep.
Right.
We've moved further as an alliance toward his doorstep than he has moved toward ours. Imagine if he had expanded his buffer zone or his area of influence to France.
Well, that would have to be the equivalent.
Rather than we expanded it right to your damn border, not you to the English Channel. What if Putin was at the English Channel and said, "How dare you threaten us by trying to retake, the western part of France?"
Well, I think Hitler did do that, didn't he? I mean, he did something along those lines. Yeah.
So the sum of what I'm saying is that they've framed this as a just war. The last really just war, in terms of the moral imagination, was World War II. And what made it just were the same things that supposedly make this just. It was a war for democracy. It was a war over principle. It was a war over the idea that you can't move into another country, which is pretty funny on the part of imperial colonial powers, whose entire power was generated by moving into other countries.
Right.
And taking them over.
Exactly.
Countries that don't border them. Countries who they get a beachhead from the sea and then go and take over. But in any case, yes, these places shorn of their empires now, I guess, are reduced to ethical war. And I see them longing to make, maybe it's generational, because, you know, in America, we have a baby boom generation whose mythology involves stopping an unjust war in Vietnam. Yay!
Mhm.
They overcame, in fact, their piggish, right-wing, uptight parents of the greatest generation who'd fought in World War II and so on. They overcame them to push down this Vietnam War. Well, that is only one kind of accomplishment for a young person. But as they age and as they're about to go to the grave, now they seem to want to do what their parents' generation did. And secretly, they may feel an inferiority complex over having not done themselves, which is, let's win our own just war.
Yeah,
but let's do it by not having to do things like the Battle of the Bulge, Normandy, you know,
right.
Island hopping in Japan, flamethrowers in caves. Let's just do it with money, the way we've done everything else in our fucking lives since we graduated from college.
That's such a good point. It's you know, we don't want to sit in 2-foot foxholes that are freezing in Bastogne, right? But we will
we'll send money.
Yeah, we'll borrow money and against the savings of Europeans and send that to Ukraine so that they can spend it quickly, as Sir Richard said, and that will scratch the itch. That'll be our Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori moment, right?
Exactly. Here's what we just saw. Here's what we just saw compared to World War I or World War II. And I include the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in that, Richard. I don't know his career. He may be a hero in some fashion. I'm not going to make fun of him, but we just saw two people talk about how much money they were going to spend on war. Is that how World War II started? Roosevelt said, we're going to spend 500 billion or whatever. They hadn't thought, they hadn't even yet conceived of figures like that back then. You know, yeah, there were things like Lend-Lease.
Yeah, exactly.
But wars were framed in terms of national resolve, troop commitments, and sacrifice by the homeland. They're just, for them, it's a fucking financial matter. It's like floating a new national corporation or something,
or more to the point, a bond,
or a bond. Yeah, a bond.
And okay, so this brings us to the quasi. I guess humorous is the wrong word for this. It's arresting, this whole thing. Let's first look at the other Die Welt report, and this is the new German chancellor, or the incoming Chancellor Merz. Let's just listen to this segment.
Germany's likely next chancellor, Friedrich Merz, and his prospective coalition partners have agreed to raise hundreds of billions of euros to boost defense and infrastructure. Merz said the measure was urgent in the wake of the United States pausing military aid to Ukraine. He also said he hoped the outgoing parliament would vote on the required motion for the funding increase next week already.
Given the growing threat situation, we are fully aware that Europe, and with it Germany, must now make very large efforts very quickly to strengthen the defense of the country and of Europe. We trust that the USA will continue to stand by our mutual alliance commitments in the future. However, we also know that the resources for our national and alliance defense must be significantly expanded. The necessary decisions, especially with regard to the federal budget, can no longer be postponed, especially in light of recent decisions taken by the American government.
DW's political correspondent Simon Young joins me.
Pay rent.
Now, Simon, big plans there by a possible future governing coalition. Why now?
Sorry. Go ahead, Walter.
Okay, on the one hand, you've got the former Deputy Allied Supreme Commander saying they were naive not to get on the stick and start paying their own bills a long time ago. not just their own bills, but building up their own capacity. And now it's the failure of the Americans to put up with their naivety. In other words, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Can they please tell us? Is it the suddenness of our withdrawal that bothers them, or is that the fact that they wished it had never happened, or that they regret not doing it themselves? I've heard all those points of view, but how else could this have occurred if you think about it? At what
Right.
point? At what point was Europe going to do this? Do they believe they should never have had to, and that it's an absolute offense to be asked to go to this? I don't quite understand their problem. But from the point of view of the United States, I think, well, they had to grow up someday, right? They had to move out of the house someday. They had to start paying for their own apartment someday. Now it's happening. Why are we all so unhappy with each other? Even some of them admit that they were naive, meaning youthful or juvenile. This isn't the terrible thing that everybody's portraying it. Europe's doing its thing now, growing up, doing it in time. Maybe not, of course. And America is going to be able to take some of the money that subsidized Europe's frickin' social programs. They have nationalized health care. They have, pensions, government pensions. They have all these kind of things, courtesy of the United States for paying their fucking security bills.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it should be a kind of a great moment for Europe, right? We're getting back on our feet. The problem is that, the European Union as an idea, it is a little screwy, and especially in the middle of a crisis, and especially since it was conceived with partnership with the United States in mind. So it gets a little weird fast, I think.
Well, children are conceived by their parents with the idea of partnership in mind.
That's true. You're right. Yes.
Until the age of 18 or 21 or 25, or in poorer neighborhoods, 12. And at some point, the partnership becomes a true partnership of equals rather than one a dependent and the other a parent. That we're getting there 75, 80 years after World War II seems entirely natural to me, and not reason for a complete rift and meltdown.
Yep. So, all right. So they need 800 billion euros or dollars or whatever it is. I can't remember which one it is actually.
800 billion. If it's euros, where's the euro?
Yeah, 800 billion euros. Yep. So
that's $1 trillion, right? I mean, isn't it?
They're saying that's $867 million now. So the euros falling on hard times, or I don't know, whatever. But so earlier this week, Walter, you sent to me a thing about it was a story from Belarus.eu with basically talking about how the Europeans were going to sell bonds to do this, and then I looked and I found that it's yet another story from the German site. But let's just look at the headline. Eurobonds, EU plans debt revolution to finance defense. So they are going to sell bonds.
Next time I can't pay my bill, I'll say I'm going through a debt revolution. Call back later.
Yep.
What? That could be many things. A debt revolution. What do they mean by it?
Yeah, they're saying the new mantra is we're going to do whatever it takes. This will allow member states to significantly increase their amount, and basically we're going back to selling war bonds. And you and I were joking about this. this is like going back to World War II time in the United States.
Yes.
You know, I went back and looked. I was looking for the funniest war bonds ads I could find from the World War II period. I mean, everyone's seen Captain America and they know that concept. But everybody, you went to a movie, you could not see a movie without seeing a war bonds ad. Everybody was doing them. Bugs Bunny had a good one, so let's take a look at that. And while we watch, I get it looks like I gotta make sure that my new computer is plugged in. Hang on a sec, everybody. But take a listen.
The tall man with a high hat and a whiskers on his chin will soon be knocking at your door, and you ought to be in. The tall man with the high hat will be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, "Any bonds today?" Come on and get 'em, folks. Come on, skip right up and get 'em. Any bonds today? Bonds of freedom, that's what I'm selling. Any bonds?
Okay.
And those bonds were to save Europe, by the way.
They were what? To save Europe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uncle Sam came knocking at your door on behalf of Winston Churchill. And
Yeah. There's going to be a guy with a beard knocking on your door, but it's not going to be a guy with a beard. It's going to be an Aryan princess, right? And it doesn't sound like she's going to be asking either.
So if anybody's lived in Europe, they might want to correct me, but I have at certain times, and I'll tell you something that you might not know if you haven't. Europe, in its household finance and in its personal savings technology, was until recently, basically 19th century. You'd go to the post office in Great Britain and bring like $20, and that would be your savings account at the post office. It paid almost zero interest. And these kind of low interest savings accounts that were for very modest people are a feature of European life. And in one story I read, it is the savings accounts, I don't know if they do it still at the post office in Great Britain, of what they call the charwoman, the maid, and so on, who they're asking to build this $800 trillion fund from. I mean, they're asking, I'm sure, from other sources, obviously, but there has been some special focus on making this a widespread appeal to the common person to somehow trade these low income or low interest accounts for these bonds.
Yeah, that's what it said. I think her name is Maria Albuquerque. She's like the European Finance Commissioner or something like that. She says a large part of European savings lies in the form of deposits at very low interest rates between 0.3 and 0.8% per annum, and even in the form of cash reserves. Mobilizing even a small part of these resources will change the investment landscape in the EU. So, are
they going to give them more interest? Are they saying, or are they just going to?
No, that's what they're saying. We're just going to we're going to use the interest that you could be earning to finance this war that we're not going to fight.
Sounded to me like they were almost going to use the principal.
Right, yeah, or they're using the principal even, yeah. So that's crazy, and I don't know, Walter. I mean, this whole thing is, it's so frustrating, right? Because
it's fun to look back at World War II, and I'm not being a revisionist here, and see that Bugs Bunny, who I promise you on Saturday morning when he opened the movie or, you know, the feature film at the Last Picture Show in Clarendon, Texas, he was not speaking to the bigwigs of America. Bugs Bunny was making his pitch for money to farmers and teenagers and gas station owners and so on. Not bankers. They didn't say, hey, they didn't come into the board meeting and say, I saw Bugs Bunny this weekend and I think we should be doing more to support the war effort. America's small person also fought the war on their behalf, you know, got on ships and went to the Battle of the Bulge and came back sad without a foot. If he came back.
Yes, exactly.
And yet we are still
sad without a foot. That's so horrible.
And yet 80 years later, after having done what Bugs Bunny said to support financially their never-ending intra-tribal, intra-imperial conflicts, financially and with our blood, and then after having won, so to speak, in a kind of standoff between the East and the West, you know, having moved to the front and then renamed our former ally Russia our greatest enemy, or Soviet Union our greatest enemy, they still are depending on us to just be there forever. And George Marshall, who came after the war, said, let's build this Europe up. It's the best deal we can do. And we did. We never stopped.
I think it was the right thing to do. I think
we absolutely did. But built them up to be what? Adults or 13-year-olds?
Well, so that's what we're finding out, right? Like, so did we? I mean, was the door closed to keep Russia out, or was it the door closed to keep Europe in because they're insane and they can't be relied on to not start wars? I don't know. I mean, to me, this whole thing. And you have to go back to the very beginning of the process, and this is where people always get mad if you start to litigate NATO expansion and whether that was the right thing to do. I mean, I certainly understood it for the Baltic countries, but you know, where the Russians understood the deal to be one thing, and then when they started seeing their former territories one by one rolled into you know, a Western military alliance, they naturally freaked out, and now we're in the middle of what they're openly calling a global conflict, and you know, it's amazing, right? So Macron is talking about the North Korean troops and the Iranian supplies and everything. NATO is this gigantic multinational alliance drawing upon the collective financial and military power of most of the Western developed world, and but yet the international aggressor is the other side, and I hate saying that because it makes me sound like an apologist for Russia, but why can't we just not have a hostile relationship? Why did we have to do this hyper aggressive thing of putting all these countries into NATO?
Because we were expanding our reach, our influence, the pool of resources available at the prices we wanted, expanding the places that we could put pipelines. We were reining in China, Russia. We were making inroads into the undeveloped Central Asia, which continues to be a prize for everybody, right? And especially because it contains all sorts of mineral resources, which are now particularly valuable in the world of electric cars and batteries, and lithium and rare earth minerals. But in the midst of that, some would say imperialist or expansion or mercantilist, I don't know, somebody went across somebody else's border and it all of a sudden was converted into a holy war.
Yeah, exactly. And it's impossible to talk to anybody about a holy war because
because there can only be one.
Right. There's no solution. There's no negotiation, and Um, neither all of the sides have forfeited any pretense to rationality, and
Dude, I've spent my whole time in life and my whole lifetime in America fighting the devil. Okay, in little Minnesota, we fought the devil when Billy Graham came on TV. You know, and we fought the devil in our souls, and we fought the devil in our society, and we fought the devil in heaven, and we fought the devil in communism. We fight it all over the world in godless communism, which is what we used to call it. Because it was bad, not because it was just dictatorial, but because it was atheistic. We don't quite make that argument anymore. But anyway, some on the right do. But in any way, what I'm saying is, in a war against the devil, in the real world, we never win, nor do we expect to. Today, I will be tempted 5 times, and I may give in 2. And across the street, I will see people, you know, go into the bar, happily married, and come out of the bar screaming at each other. We live in a mixed, checkerboarded world of good and evil. But in international affairs, it must only be one.
It's yeah, no, you're right. This is the new devil, right? Like it's the devil of warmongering and the determination of like people who have the minds of kids to play around with life and death. I mean, it boggles my mind that there are people who look at this as, an Axis and Allies game that they're playing on a board. Again, they're never going to fight. They're never going to see any kind of real sacrifice from this, and the whole thing could be. This could be a finished situation relatively quickly. It'll be like every good baseball trade. Both sides feel bad at the end of the day, and that's what this is going to have to be at the end. And they're not willing to go there. So I mean, it's just a momentous thing that's happening. The door finally opens for a negotiation, and Europe slams it shut by a pledge to raise 800 billion euros and go into debt and go the distance. This is like Field of Dreams. Go the distance. That's what they're saying.
Okay, number one, the reason that they're talking about money instead of arms and troops and so on, because that's weird. You'd think they'd at least talk about both of them at the same time.
There's no pretension that they're going to send any of their own.
Right. So the reason they're talking purely about money makes me suspicious, because remember how often we're told that the money that goes to Ukraine really doesn't go to Ukraine. It comes back to us.
Right.
We send them money so they can buy stuff from us. I don't know why we do it that way. Why don't we just pay ourselves and give it to them? But we supposedly send it to them so they can pay us back. And I guess some things get lost in the transactions. There's brokerage fees and that, and a little bit of corruption, slippage, pilferage. Maybe they like that.
Carrying charges, my boy. Carrying charges, as they say in Casablanca, right?
The cynics and people like Julian Assange tell us that that's the point, man. That washing that money into what Assange called the hands of an international security elite is what it's all about. So no wonder they talk about it in terms of money, because that's what they see as the benefit of war.
That's what this is, really.
But you see, the benefits of war used to be territorial gains. Now the benefits of war are backsheesh on the money that you spend on war, or get other people to spend on it.
Yeah, and they're also bureaucratic and organizational too, right? Like it's a continual flow of other people's money into a whole bunch of.
Can I talk to Steve Griffin?
I want to address it too, but go ahead. You go first.
Stephen, where did you get the idea that we were defending the USSR? Where? At the time it was the USSR first, we were allies with it until about 1947. We then opposed it. Of course we did. But we successfully opposed it. It collapsed and it lost its, let's say, buffer zone and client states in Eastern Europe. So did I say that was a tragedy? No, we took that as a given and, expressed no opinion on it. So what are you talking about?
Yeah,
And why are you trolling me, mister?
I went to school in the USSR. The USSR was horrific. It is maybe the worst human rights violator in the history of Earth. I took tours in the north where the Soviets used to chain people to logs and roll them down the steps of monasteries in the middle of winter naked. I mean, they were an absolutely horrible regime. Needed to be opposed. It was a dire threat to world security, and its collapse was one of the greatest things that ever happened to humanity. I'm all for it.
Matt merely said after it collapsed, why did we have to go on being quite as warlike?
Right, like there was a way, in the same way that we went into Japan after defeating Japan, or went into Germany after defeating Germany, and we rebuilt a country whose people were largely positively inclined to us. I think probably more in Germany than Japan initially. The same thing was true of Russia. Their people wanted, I think, they genuinely expected that they would be brought into the international community. And even if we didn't do that, even if we didn't do a Marshall Plan for Russia, which is what Jeff Sachs wanted, we could have not provoked them a little bit. I mean, I think there are ways we could have gone about this that would have made them feel a little bit less paranoid. Yeah.
Right. Hey, Steve, I made the mistake on our last broadcast of not watching the comments and seeing the outrageousness that is sometimes used to I don't know, by paid subscribers to discredit the hosts of the show. But I challenge you in a future comment to quote the exact part of the show in which we said the USSR was someone to be befriended or not opposed.
Yeah,
Put that up. Put that up, man.
You won't find many more anti-Soviet people than me. Yeah.
I told a story, recently. Well, not just anti-Soviet. I'm even anti after what happened. I told a story about Putin perhaps assassinating a friend of my father's on the show. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
You can pretend that less than wholehearted Bugs Bunny dancing on a screen support of Zelensky and Ukraine to the very bitter end of society and maybe the planet Earth is something Russia friendly or Putin friendly or USSR revisionist. But you also don't have a right to speak because nobody ever said that. And all you're trying to do is propagandize away legitimate conversation. And we can't have that.
No. And although I think Putin would like to not restore the Soviet Union, but restore Russia to a superpower status close to that, he's not in a position to do that yet. And but either way, this current conflict, it needs to end, and risking it expanding into Europe is the ultimate nightmare.
And the Deputy Allied Supreme Commander of NATO and Ursula with the hair would both agree that it needs to end in total victory.
Right.
And short of that, no. Every war needs to end on the part of both sides in total victory until they realize it can't, or they can't afford it, or they're being pressured by people who don't have their best interests in mind. And they turn around and say, are we fighting this war for ourselves or for other people who made promises about what they'll do if we win it for them, but won't send troops?
Absolutely, yeah. So here's a better comment from Let Me Be Me. The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I've never read anything that evil. If you've read all three of those books, it'll be hard to ever have a positive thought about the Soviet Union ever again. If you read that, and there's lots of other things that are similar.
Unlike, let me tell you, people, if I don't know how old you are, though, it was possible in America to have a positive vision of the Soviet Union. And you know who had it? The American left for a long, long time.
Way longer than it should have. Yeah.
Way longer than they should have. To the fact that they fractured into like the 1950s and 60s over what had been revealed about Stalin's crimes. Half of them didn't want to believe it. A bunch of them didn't want to admit it, even though they knew it to be true. We had American intellectuals like Edmund Wilson, our greatest probably literary critic and man of letters, who wasn't just specifically a novelist, writing in defense. We had all kinds of New York-based intellectual magazines literally going to war and at each other's throats. Lillian Hellman versus whoever it might be, out, Kazin. If you know the literary side of America's Cold War, who really had a hard time stopping their defense of the Soviet Union. No one's been defending it for a long time, man. But the people who did back when had positions at Columbia University and Harvard and so on, and were some of America's top public intellectuals. And they went on doing it long after the garbage men from Akron, Ohio had settled it in their minds.
Right. Yeah, they somehow look. Moscow had nice subways. I mean, you can start with that, but I guess after that it gets more complicated. But yeah, definitely.
Bernie went on vacation. Went on his honeymoon there. Okay, Bernie Sanders went on his honeymoon there. Did Walter Kern Sr. go on his honeymoon there? No, he went to Florida like regular people because he avoided the Soviet Union. Dude, I hate to be suddenly told that the defense of the Soviet Union is some ongoing stream and the American, independent, conservative, libertarian mindset.
No, it's ridiculous. And there's a million books, everybody, and we've actually done some of them in our short story segment, which we're going to move to presently. But by the way, did you like the Gulag books? I thought Gulag 3 was the best one, and the ability to because writing angry is hard to keep up. And
what year was it published in the United States, and what year did Solzhenitsyn take refuge in the United States? I was a young teenager, I believe. It could have been.
It would have been the 60s, probably.
I think it was slightly later than that.
Was it later than that? Yeah, I don't know.
I'll look it up. Maybe. You see, I think of our commenters as not just proto trolls and also wonderful friends, but volunteer researchers. So when I ask a question, expect it to just show up as an answer right there. But in any case, I was 12 years old when I read the Gulag Archipelago. That's what a young fogey, as they say in England, I was. Hey, Walt, can you come out and play soccer? No, I'm reading the Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah, I'm reading this 40-pound book.
It's gray, and it's published by a guy with a weird beard who, we had to get out of the Soviet Union, and it's about their prison system. Okay, dude? I'll be out there in a minute. Anyway, that was me. This was Soviet-loving Walter. So I read this giant urge of a book that was just like one horror after another.
Yeah, it's just never ending. It's ceaseless horrors. And then you go on to other books. I mean, we read a little bit of the Kalima Tales.
73.
73.
That means when I was 11 and turning 12. So
yeah, absolutely horrible stuff. Anyway, just to wrap this up, I mean, the events of this week are. We keep saying this, but we're gonna look back at this as a major moment. Well, I guess unless they can come to some kind of accommodation and end this thing. Right now, it's trending toward Ukraine becoming a Euro-Russian war, which would be, horrible beyond comprehension. So I don't know. I'm hoping that isn't what we're looking at, but it looks like that to me. So,
Well,
any closing thoughts on that, Walter?
Yeah, interestingly, when I was a kid, two things were happening one year. The Vietnam War was finally ending in my little town, where they would ring the bells because we had a hippie left-wing Lutheran minister who, wore a turtleneck instead of a collar. We were apprised at every minute at school and in the town hall of how the Vietnam War was going. And there was a ceasefire earlier that we thought was the end. But when it finally ended ignominiously in 1975, at around the same time Richard Nixon is being kicked out of office, maybe, I don't know why, actually, but it wasn't that he achieved peace, but the war did end under him, and he had pulled back. Well, that was a wonderful moment.
It was.
Yeah.
And
the next warlike thing that happened, as I remember, was like Grenada, basically, in terms of us going in. So we had a nice long peaceful transition, or peaceful interlude. And during that, I asked my dad if I could join the U.S. Navy in 1978, right before I went to college. He said, "No fucking way."
Yeah, right. Because we were too stupid. We didn't know how bad it was.
Well, also in 1978, who wanted to go into war? There had never been a lower level of esteem, prestige, morale for the U.S. Armed Forces.
That was when Stripes came out. Remember?
Yeah, when Stripes came out.
Yeah.
And yet I had nursed this, the kid who had read Gulag Archipelago at 12 had nursed this notion from 3 years old of becoming a naval officer, which I thought was the most romantic, interesting, Jeffersonian, global position one could hold, And my dad said, "No effing way." And so I didn't get to fight the Soviet Union at sea or invade Grenada or Panama or any of the other things we started doing to get in shape.
That's so funny. When I came back from studying in Russia, I tried to join the Coast Guard reserves, and I went into the office. I took the physical and everything, and I told them, I said, "Hey, I speak Russian. I could be great for you guys, right? And I mean, that's a real asset." And that was the end. Like, apparently that wasn't a good thing.
Why? Did that mean they thought you were going to infiltrate the Coast Guard?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I flunked my physical. I had a Osgood's ladder's disease, so they flunked me on that. But I don't think they would have if it hadn't been for that. So anyway, crazy stuff. We don't have time to take a. Sorry, go ahead.
I want peace. Okay, I want peace.
Yeah, I want peace. We both do.
And I believe that it can be achieved without letting the devil take over the globe. And I believe that can be achieved in a way that, doesn't destroy or risk destroying the planet. And I think Europe now, with its new sensible attitude, will learn to protect itself. So I want peace.
I'm with you. To quote again from Casablanca, right now the devil has the world by the throat, and let's hope he lets go. So, Walter, you picked out an amazing short story this week. Finally, took the ball from me. I had been going back to the 19th century with all these dreary things. So it's called A City of Churches by Donald. Is it Bartholomew?
Bartlemy. We've done one story.
Yeah, we did one, but that was so funny. That one. This one. Well, anyway, we'll get into it. It's hilarious. But Walter, do you want to give the rundown on the story?
Okay, so Donald Bartlemy was an American surrealist, let's call him that, comic, experimental fiction writer who worked in the short story mostly in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s mostly. An experimental time in America where we didn't expect everything to be reassuring or even to make sense. Recently David Lynch died and everybody was applauding. Oh, his stories were so fractured and strange and you didn't know what they meant and had odd tones. Well, Lynch, came behind a lot of people who did that for a long time, certainly in Europe, but in America starting really in the 1950s. So Bartleby is probably the greatest short story writer in that kooky, surrealist, offbeat vein. And his method was this: he would take an idea that you always heard talk about, or a phrase. I can imagine him writing a story called "Rules-Based International Order," and it would start out with, Margaret of Toledo, Ohio, was so glad to be living under a rules-based national order that she decided to add extra rules at her home. Well, this story kind of in that manner takes the phrase which you used to hear a lot in America when you'd go into a town or you'd read about it in an almanac, or there might even be a sign when you drove into it called, Waterbury, Vermont, City of Churches. So this story is called City of Churches because it, as I say, it used to be a kind of like real estate or promotional cliche that such and such was a city of churches. So in this story, a female new resident to a town in New England is talking to a representative of the town, maybe the head of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it feels like they don't even. The town's called Prester, right? And they I guess it's the Board of Education that she's talking to.
Well, just read the first part because it goes so quickly. This is a story of 5 pages, everybody, and it's 5 pages that you won't regret.
Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong place. Sorry. Go ahead. I gotta find it again. Sorry.
I don't have.
I was reading commentary. Apologies.
Anyway, this young woman comes to this town and she's met by, a representative of the town, some elder or official or something. He says, "We're a city of churches. We have the First Baptist over there. We have the Second Monrovian, whatever. We have the Third Reformed Lutheran over there." And as is Bartlemy's specialty, he takes an expression literally, and he suddenly describes a city mostly made of churches. In fact, it's so made of churches that they ask her which one she wants to live in because all the churches are residential.
Right.
And
yes, even the barbershop is in a church.
Even the barbershop's in a church. It's such a moral town. It's such an upright town. It's a town of such, and I picked it because we talk a lot in this stuffy way nowadays about norms and rules and so on, that we're getting a little city of churches, America, city of churches in our tone. And just read a little bit of it, Matt. I mean, to give them an idea of how it sounds.
I mean, the beginning is so funny. Yes, Mr. Phillips said, ours is a city of churches, all right. Cecilia nodded, following his pointing hand. Both sides of the street were solidly lined with churches, standing shoulder to shoulder in a variety of architectural styles. The Bethel Baptist stood next to the Holy Messiah Free Baptist, St. Paul's Episcopal, next to Grace Evangelical Covenant. Then came the First Christian Science, the Church of God, All Souls, Our Lady of Victory, the Society of Friends, the Assembly of God, and the Church of the Holy Apostles. The spires and steeples of the traditional buildings were jammed in next to the broad imaginative flights of the contemporary design. So it's just nothing but churches in every direction. And then he says, everyone here takes a great interest in church matters. As if offhandedly, she's looking at nothing but churches, and that's his comment. It's just so funny. Yeah.
Right. And then she, and
it would be like he's standing in a sphere that's painted red in every direction, and he said something like, red's a popular color around here. That's basically what he was doing.
So the essence of Bartlemy's humor is to take literally the idea that this city is all made of churches, even down to like you can get apartments in the belfries. Those are special apartments. They're cheaper because you have to deal with the ringing of the bells all night, and sometimes you've got to get away out of the bells because they'll knock you in the head. Or you can live in the other parts of the churches. And she says, "Can you rent a car in this town?" And he said, and so on the one hand, you've made absurd the landscape, but on the other hand, you're keeping mundane and very dry and normal the conversation. You know what I mean? Those are the contrasting elements. And she said, "But can you rent a car in this town?" He says, "If you rented a car, that would mean you would want to go somewhere else, and no one wants to go somewhere else in a city of churches. What's wrong with you?" And basically, then he gets to asking her, the key question, which
what denomination are you?
What denomination are you? And how does she answer that?
Oh, this is amazing. Her answer is, "I can will my dreams," Cecilia said. "I can dream whatever I want. If I want to dream that I'm having a good time in Paris or some other city, all I have to do is go to sleep and I will dream that dream. I can dream whatever I want." And he says, "What do you dream then, mostly?" Mr. Phillips said, looking at her closely. "Mostly sexual things," she said. She was not afraid of him. So immediately, like, the whole edifice of the story is now thrown completely out of whack. And now he's scrambling to get her back to the rental car idea.
Because the other humor, the everyday humor essence of this story is that everyone has had a conversation with a town booster who wants them to move there or something. Anybody who's ever looked for real estate, even if you're just pretend looking for real estate while on vacation in New England, and you come into a charming town and you make the mistake of going into a real estate office and they say, "Oh, Peaberry, Vermont, city of churches, city of rivers."
Right.
Whatever. And then as you go, "Well, I don't know, then they'll launch a new appeal about what's wonderful about the city." And so after she shows that her religion is that she can control her own dreams and go to Paris and have sexual fantasies, rather than rejecting her, he basically, "Well, you have room through that." And
then she basically says, "You've got to stay. Like we need you precisely, basically, to sit at the desk for the rental car office."
Well, yeah. So like a timeshare salesman, basically, which is what he tells her. Okay, that's a little odd. He asks her also who she's going to be living with, and she says alone or something. And he says, "That's interesting. Most people live with their spouse or their child if they're old, or they're whatever, living alone and having a religion of sexy dreams, but still they want her. Nothing's a deal breaker in the city of churches."
I mean, it's a little bit Charles Portis in that sense, right? Because he's just selling the whole, like, it doesn't matter what. There's no wrong sale, right?
And his final concession is, "You know what? We're going to make it so you can rent a car in our city of churches. In fact, we're going to make a car rental agency in the front of one of the churches, and we're going to have you sit there. And that's going to perfect our town in a way that it never has been. Now we will add to it and perfect it, and you will be there all day renting cars out of a church."
And so her first objection, weirdly enough, is sensible and financial. If there's nobody who's going to rent a car here, why am I starting this business? I won't stay, she said, not if there's not any sound business reason for staying. "We want you," said Mr. Phillips. "We want you standing behind the counter of the car rental agency during regular business hours. It will make the town complete." "I won't," she said. "Not me. You must. It's essential." "I'll dream," she said. "Things you won't like." "We are discontented," said Mr. Phillips. "Terribly, terribly discontented. Something is wrong." She says, "I'll dream the secret," she said. "You'll be sorry." And then eventually he ends up sort of grabbing her by the hand, gripping her arm. It says, "You are ours. our car rental girl, be nice, there's nothing you can do, wait and see, Cecilia
That's the end of the story.
and that's the end of the story. And
the timeshare
salesman, you're
salesman,
like, what? But go ahead.
The timeshare salesman for the city of Churches, the lead salesman, the burger, the head of the Chamber of Commerce says, you can't leave.
Right.
And then he admits what we all have suspected the whole time. We're really unhappy. It's terrible here. It's boring here.
It
We
just
need
comes
new
pouring
blood.
out.
We need new blood. And she says, I can hurt you with my dreams. And he says, no, you can. She says, you'll wait and see.
It's so funny that you're right. The comic method is sort of pre-arranged, right? You take a totally ridiculous situation, but you play it completely deadpan, right? The conversations have the same tone, the same character, the same pace that they would as if it were real, right? Like as if you were visiting a real city of churches where the churches weren't literally stacked on top of each other, but just kind of spread throughout the town. But what he does is he accelerates the absurdity at the end until all just sort of primary id material is pouring out of each character's head, and it's incredibly funny. I mean, he's a really, really funny writer. I can't believe I haven't read more of his stuff.
The Library of America. I don't usually mention commercial enterprises on this, but the Library of America is kind of a semi-nonprofit, or maybe totally nonprofit publishing enterprise that publishes America's greatest writers. Not all of them, but most of them. And the Donald Bartleby collection is worth getting. You can these stories are 5 pages, 6 pages long. You can open them at any point and have half an hour of really elevated literary delight, but at the same time low down fun. And as Matt just said, the method is really interesting, and it's appropriate to the 60s and 70s, which is an era we're talking about right now, because a lot of our problems, I think, are that we haven't properly learned those lessons. We're coming back to them. As I said earlier, like, oh, I wanted peace in 1975. I remember what it was like to have been long at war. And one thing I think America has forgotten is how susceptible it is to
satire,
to self-righteousness and smugness and stuffiness, and to letting language overtake real instinct. And Bartleby's message to me was that language hides who we are. It's sort of like psychoanalysis, which was big then. It had a message for people. The face that you present, the city of churches that you put out in front, and the lonely, instinctive, roiled, organic, sexually charged and frustrated being are two different things, and the one hides the other. In other words, he was endlessly writing about a kind of philosophical hypocrisy by which we present oneself to hide and to perhaps even kill off another. And he did it over and over. America right now is acting as though we are the paragon of morality in the world, saving democracy, saving people from all this, moral peril and unfairness, and putting a lamp on the thing. Well, last time I checked, man, we're also a place of rampant financial crime, ridiculous debt, total unfairness and disparity in terms of class relations and the distribution of our money and funds, falling down infrastructure, high crime, especially in certain places, and so on. And Bartleby wouldn't have let that pass.
No, he would have been on the internet too, like making funny videos too, I think, probably. But
he would have his historian, which a former NATO deputy assistant, adjutant commander to the advisor, comes home and says, you know, honey, how's the rules-based order going? Well,
it needs a little bit more oregano.
I lined up all the cheese, honey, and I'm no longer going to use ammonia on the floor, only natural cleansers. And I've color-coded all the books in the living room. And the story would end in some weird way where he like attacks her against he attacks her against the color-coded books and says, "And now we could get down, baby," or something, and you'd go like, this is a frightening, sexually frustrated person who made his wife color code all the books so that he can like maritally rape her against them. And maybe rules-based orders aren't always what they seem to be.
Right, yeah, or a python would come down through the ceiling randomly at the very end. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the perfect way to do satire, is to take something serious and then do it as if in perfect deadpan, but layer it, put a layer of absurdity over it. Like the Weird Al Yankovic method, right? Which is do a Bob Dylan song, and then make it sound exactly like one of his songs, except have all the lyrics just be palindromes, right? So it's just total absurdity, but you're really really trying to make it sound like a Bob Dylan song to total nonsense lyrics. And this is kind of what he does. He tells a story that superficially sounds like it's real and it makes sense, but it's just totally a bunch of nonsensical interactions, and just really funny. I mean, I think we need more of that. There is a lot of stuff like this on the internet, but not so much in prose, right? Like I think that's what I miss a little bit.
If you remember the 70s at all in American entertainment and into the early 80s, you remember the show MASH. MASH was a catch-22 like roast of the absurdity of war. It was practically a pacifist production. They were constantly laughing at the pieties of their commanders, ignoring orders, hiding out, using their supplies for things other than they were meant.
Yeah, making booze,
having sex every chance they could, and then when the stuffed shirts would come in helicopters, pranking them in some way. That, if we applied that to our vision of military virtue now, if we use that satirical, mordant, kind of black humor tone, dude, we'd be thrown into the clink, at least the social media clink, for loving Putin.
It's true. And instead of that, we get the old man and the night agent, and some of these shows are actually good, but it's all kind of,
you know what we're really getting a lot of right now, dude? Special forces porn.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Special operators porn, where either somebody who used to be a special operator, whatever, Task Force Orange or whatever it might be, is now an accountant, but suddenly has to snap back in order to save their family. Or we're getting taught, and I don't want to run down our fellow podcasters, but a lot of podcasts these days are like war stories by young guys from the Great War on Terrorism, using a lot of army jargon and basically selling vitamins and workouts. Okay.
Well, good for them, I guess that's...
America's volunteer military has to constantly romanticize what it does, okay, and make it seem like it's really the greatest way to get ripped, plus you kill bad guys, and then you come back and you get really great jobs because everybody wants to hire you. But we're in a period of romanticization of especially the male special forces dude talking to each other. Like, I turned on Sean Ryan the other day and it was him talking to a actual World War II Pacific vet, and it was pretty fascinating. But man, it was just impenetrable military bro talk. You were in the CC7? Were you in the first wave? Or well, I didn't get there because my comms
because my erg top was on a whatever 7, and yeah. No,
If
I
I
know
was-
exactly what you're talking about.
And if
yeah.
I was 16, I'd be like, I want to be like those two.
Oh yeah, you would be turgid with excitement. Anyway, this is great stuff. Donald Bartlemy, highly recommend this story, any story. I'm going to go get the collection actually. And thanks everybody for being patient with me during my foibles this week. Walter, you especially. And I think we both want peace. Let's keep that up and hope that they somehow get there by accident, because it doesn't look like they want to get there on purpose. So see you next week.
See you then.